there was this really pivotal moment for me where I was feeding my daughter and I was feeling so frustrated because it was taking so long, and I was like, oh, I could be doing all of these other things. And I noticed how my inner dialogue, the way that I talked to myself, was so harsh and so critical. Sturdy confidence comes from, I think the first and most important piece of authenticity is play. Actually is so courageous. Play is also something that is like incredibly important to our well-being. Even long life is tied to playfulness.
Today's guest, Piera Gelardi, was the former co-founder and creative director of Refinery 29, a media company focused to inspire women and diversify their image in the media industry. Piera is a strong role model in being her true, authentic self, sparked by so much joy and creativity. Today, she will teach you practices on how you can become more self-compassionate, how that will impact your success in a positive way, how you can use play and creativity to solve challenges, and how to better find your authentic self. So I would say let's get started. I'm Alina, and this is Growth Essentials, the podcast for your best self on things you wished you learned in school. Piera, for the first part, I would like to know a bit more about your earliest context, your childhood, your upbringing, and how that part of your life kind of shaped your life afterwards and the woman that you are today.
What a beautiful question. Well, let's see. I grew up in a small town in Maine, which is in the northeast part of the United States. So the town that I grew up in was 1,000 people. It was on the coast of Maine, so very beautiful. My parents were and are artists and entrepreneurs. So my dad is an engineer, and he still has his own business. And my mom was a social worker and someone very involved in her community. And I grew up with a big Italian family close by. My nonna lived a mile from our house, so we would, often have big family dinners at her house on Sunday, and she stayed with us most nights. And so just had a lot of family around growing up, and a very creative family. I just remember doing all kinds of projects all the time, being out in nature, exploring, letting my imagination run wild. And some favorite memories that I always think about are growing up. My dad is he's very passionate about work, and he raised us very much to work hard and to passionately pursue success. And my mom was like a nice counterbalance to that, because she is someone that's meditated for 40 years. She's very involved in her community as a social worker. She is kind of, I feel like by nature like a humanitarian. So she kind of balanced out that kind of work productivity message from my dad with a bit more of a message around community and being tapped into ourselves and our well-being. So they were a really nice balance. I think growing up, I had my brother Pepin and we were close when we were kids, and we were fought a lot when we were a little bit older, and we're close again now. But I think that my upbringing was my dad encouraging us to do business brainstorms around the kitchen table as kids, and come up with whatever whim we had. My brother wanted to have a teddy bear factory, and so my parents would say okay, what's your teddy bear factory, how's it going to be different from other teddy bear factories, and what's it going to be called, and what are your the teddy bears that you make look like. And we would just have these kind of fun, often very silly business brainstorms around the kitchen table. And then my mom, would read us my fondest memory of my mom is her reading us feminist folk tales. She was very intentional about looking for books to read us that had strong women protagonists, and that were multicultural stories. And so I definitely have a lot of memories of her reading to us, and also just like the intentional book choices that she brought to the table.
Did that ever, especially that, also drive to success that you saw your dad, right, very entrepreneurial, did that ever put pressure on you for your like next steps in life?
My dad and my family definitely, had that drive to work hard and be successful. But then, also that's like kind of the culture, the capitalist culture that we live in too has such a push to be productive and to, where our worth is tied to our productivity. And so, as much as I'm grateful for the ways that has pushed me and driven me, and for the success that I've had as a result of that hard work, I do think that I've had to find a balance with myself. I had a period where I realized how much, especially when I had my daughter, I realized how much I was defining my worth by my productivity, and how like there was this really pivotal moment for me where I was feeding my daughter and I was feeling so frustrated because it was taking so long, and I was like, oh, I could be doing all of these other things, and like this is just so frustrating. And I told a friend of mine about it, and she said, well, isn't that, I'm going to cry. She said, well, isn't that the most important thing you could be doing in any moment, is like nurturing your daughter and feeding her? And I was like so emotional about it because I was like, oh my God, yeah. And how like it just made me realize how like deeply entrenched this idea was for me, and how I needed to disentangle that and work on it. And not that I've solved it for myself, but I do think over the last like 4 years of being a mom and also having a shift in my career, I've work to balance that out a bit more. And now that I'm entering a new chapter, I'm trying to be intentional about finding that balance of like pursuing, the vision and pursuing the impact that I want to have, but not letting, productivity or success in a traditional sense uh, define me. I also think that my health kind of suffered from working really, really hard. And there was like a few moments where I just completely was ignoring my body, my health, everything. And so that's something I don't want to do again.
What are you doing in those moments when you still feel maybe sometimes that guilt comes up that you're not being productive, quote unquote, right now? Like, what are some things that you are doing to stop that thought cycle, so to say, of not feeling guilty, of taking care of yourself, of your own health, of whatever it is that you want to enjoy right now?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that I've tried to redefine what productivity means to me. So now I think about a day, like if I think about the productivity of a day, I think about it more in terms of the things that I value. So I think about, did I take courageous action today? Did I connect today? Was I generous, and did I have fun? So like for me, I've sort of shifted and tried to like redefine what productivity looks like. And like I think the most traditional question is kind of like, did I take courageous action? Because instead of focusing on like the quantity of like to-dos that I checked off, I try and focus on like, did I like push through doubt and resistance to like take courageous action in the direction of my goals. And then I think the other thing is, when I journal at the end of the day, I now write down things that I did well. And doing that helps me to like expand what it means to have a successful day. So like yesterday, I didn't have like the most productive work day necessarily, but I, made a really nice birthday for my husband. Yeah, it's kind of just like more integrating like these different sides of myself, and not only valuing like productivity and success from a career perspective.
Would you actually then say, because you had also a crazy career with Refinery 29, would it have been that successful if you would have prioritized other areas of your life also more before?
It's hard to say, right? Because, like, um, but I honestly think I would have been more successful. I have a practice that I started in the last couple of years, um, like a self-compassion practice. So essentially similar, like I became a mom and I started to realize these, these thought patterns that I had, these beliefs that I held that I didn't think were super healthy. And I also realized how I was thinking about, like, if I want to teach my daughter to love herself, which is a radical act in the world that we live in, um, I have to work on my relationship to myself. And I noticed how my inner dialogue, the way that I talked to myself, was so harsh and so critical, and how I would say things to myself that I would never even say to an enemy, or like, I don't really have enemies, but like, to someone that I was really angry with or thought was being terrible. Like I would just never say these things to anyone else. And so, and it made me really sad, to kind of realize that, and to think about, like, if my daughter were going to talk about herself that way, that would really be so, yeah, just like deeply sad. So I started this practice of writing myself a note in the morning. And I write it like as though I'm a loved one. So like I like write it, and I write Dear Sweet Pea, which is the nickname that I had like when I was a kid. And I kind of use it as a chance to check in with myself, to see how I'm feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, and to meet myself with kindness, and then kind of give myself advice like as though I were a friend. And it's just been such an amazing practice um, of yeah, connecting with myself, validating myself, encouraging myself. And in it, I started to learn a lot about self-compassion. And there's this amazing doctor, Dr. Kristen Neff, who's like I think, preeminent like self-compassion researcher. And she talks about how so many people think that if you're kind to yourself, it's going to make you like weak, not driven, you're not going to be accountable to your goals. But actually, the research shows the opposite, that the more kind and compassionate we are, kind of the more sturdy ground we have to continue to like nurture ourselves, encourage ourselves, and that we're actually more accountable to our goals when we're kind to ourselves. And I think when we work on our own self compassion, that creates like a more compassionate mindset to go out in the world with as well. So, sorry, it's a long answer to your question, but you know, I could say like, oh, I don't think I would have been as successful because if I hadn't worked as hard as I did, I wouldn't get to where I got to. But I think I would have been more successful because I think I would have been more balanced. I would have had more emotional energy for things. I would have not had the health crises that I had because I would be more in tune with myself. So, yeah, I think I would have, if and when I say more successful, I also mean like more successful in that rounded way that I described before. That was less, it was less what I was focused really on career success and less so on that rounded, like whole person success that I am now. But I think I would have been more successful on both fronts, both career and like as a whole person.
What do you think was like the toughest moment in your journey so far, looking back?
I think that pressure to scale really rapidly was probably the toughest thing. It just put so much pressure on everyone and everything, and it was hard to support the team and myself like through that. So I think that was a long an ongoing challenge of just, yeah, the pressure of rapid growth. And um, it's interesting, like I was reading this book called How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, which is an incredible book, kind of a anti-productivity manifesto. But she talks about how in nature things that are, you know, have unfettered growth are destructive and like not, that's not like something that is um, like a great phenomenon in nature, but then within companies and within like capitalist society, like that kind of growth is sort of expected and pushed for. But I do think it's also puts a lot of challenges on people and systems.
Totally agree. I think that also leads us a bit to the next topic of, sometimes we feel stuck as people. We maybe like don't know what's next, but it can also just be a situation, right, where we're trying to solve something and we feel stuck. And this is what kind of leads me also, because you kind of already like spoke about your creativity and your creative mindset, and you speak about this idea that creativity can also help us to solve these moments, right, of feeling stuck and of solving challenges that are around us right now. So yeah, I wanted to ask you a bit what you concretely like mean by that, how creativity can shift like those moments, those tough moments also for us.
Give yourself like an unrelated challenge. Like I'll just put on a song and draw the song for a minute, like just listening and trying to like imagine the notes were, marks on a paper and moving. It's almost like a pen dancing. So I just try, I mean, I often take dance breaks. So I really just try and do something that shifts my mindset, that connects me to my creativity, and then like return back when I'm just feeling less frustrated. Another thing that I often think about is how like when you feel stuck and when you feel frustrated, you're like tight. It's like you're not moving. You're just like often like if you check in with your body, you're like turned into yourself, like maybe your chest feels tight, like your jaw's clenched, your hands are in fists, like. So I think about, okay, when I catch myself and I'm like a clenched fist, I need to do something to like expand myself like a balloon. I need to like get bigger and just like whether it's breathing, moving, stretching, like singing, just something that's going to shift that energy, because you're just so much more likely to find the solution and the answer when you're inflated than when you're like clenched up like a little ball, because fear actually shrinks our brain and makes us less creative. So when you are frustrated, you are in fear mode, and so you have to actually be consciously put yourself into a different mode to be able to get your brain moving again. So play for me is, basically how I inflate the balloon, how I get back to that like creative flow state.
Do you have like advice for people that it does not come natural? Because I don't mind dancing in my room. I did that actually like a few days ago, because I also had that feeling of feeling super stiff and not knowing like what how to solve like a specific problem. But I think like for some people it's really unnatural. So what would you say to them to embrace that uncomfortableness also?
Play is very vulnerable. We think of play as being frivolous, as like, it's child's play, it's unserious. But play actually is so courageous. Play requires a lot of vulnerability, and play is also something that is like incredibly important to our well-being. Even long life is tied to playfulness. So, I think if you're feeling like it's awkward, kind of just embrace that. Like, this might feel weird, but ultimately this will likely help me to feel better. So, and I think doing it in a place, in a way where you don't feel judged by other people to start is helpful. So like, I'm not saying like get up in the middle of your office with everyone around and do a dance break. I think that's, a tall order for most people. But yeah, if you're working from home, try it. Do a one song dance break. Focus less on what you might look like and focus more on how you feel and like the different things that your body can do, and just like being, playful and joyful and connecting to the music and yourself. Just breaking past your habit, breaking out of that comfort zone. And I mean, even if it's like a little thing, like it's like I'm going to walk a different way today and just try and be more observant of like the world around me. Like I do this thing, I go on these like wonder wanders. So I'm like if I feel really stuck, I'm like, I'm going to go for a walk for 30 minutes around my neighborhood, try and like take a different path, try and tune my senses to childlike wonder and see what I find. And it's amazing. Like the other day I did it and I found a magic wand. Um, like that was just like wedged in a construction fence, like waiting for me. And I was like, because we see more of what we look for. So the more we tell ourselves that we're looking for inspiration, we're looking for wonder, we're looking for beauty, like the more we're going to see it, whereas if you're so fixated on like problems or things that are going wrong, you might not find that breadcrumb trail that's like going to lead you out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also like sometimes I also, right, if we're going to like through the streets, sometimes you forget to also look up. You forget to look
Totally.
left and right, and suddenly you see things you've
Yeah.
never seen before, but you have been walking there for
Yeah.
like 50 times already. It's crazy, right? And I feel like if we get more awareness um, for experiencing those new things, then it introduces so many new
Exactly.
things that we just
Yeah.
were not able to see before, right? And that's super beautiful. Um, I also find it super interesting that you talk a lot about play, right? Because as you said, like for adults, we kind of, yeah, sometimes forget to play because we're all serious and we're following our like crazy cool routines and so on. What do you think, like, what's a simple exercise everyone can do to introduce more play into their lives and get that like childness almost a bit back introduced in your life?
Yeah. I mean, play has so many superpowers. It's really, it helps us relieve stress. It helps us to connect better with each other. It helps boost our creativity, our problem solving, and it's linked to longevity, living a longer life. And play, I think sometimes there's this false dichotomy like work, play, like they have to be opposites. In my career, I've integrated play a lot into the work that I've done, because I saw that it really opened people up creatively. Play creates trust, and it's very disarming. So it requires openness, it requires vulnerability, and those things also like allow us to connect deeper and to get below the surface of problems that we're solving. So but because I think we sort of have this like false idea that like work is over here and play is over here, we also think that play is something that we need to, that has to happen, after work hours, that we have to schedule. But really it's a mindset. Playfulness is a state of spontaneity, exploration, experimentation. So I think it's about like asking yourself, how can I weave more playfulness into my day? How can I look for wonder? How can I make a moment for experiment, doing something a different way? How can I ask myself, I think play also has so much curiosity to it, right? How can I ask myself or my team different questions that might help us to think more playfully? And I think little practices, there's so many, like everything from, just taking a moment to when you drink your coffee, like notice how it tastes, or think about like you're doing a wine tasting. It's like I'm getting notes of, chocolate and graham crackers. Or when you're on a walk, yeah, looking around you, trying to give yourself a challenge of like, can I find something beautiful? Can I find something that delights me? Um, asking someone that talk to every day a different question. Maybe ask them like, what's something you loved doing when you were a kid? I think there's so many different ways to weave more playfulness in. Again, it's like just bringing in the curiosity to ask new questions, the experimentation to try doing things a different way, and that wonder and imagination to just kind of be present with life and keep your eyes open to it.
Do you think there's also a correlation between creativity, confidence, and authenticity?
I mean, I think the most sturdy confidence comes from, yeah, taking the time to acknowledge yourself for things that um, things that you've done well, and both every day. Honestly, like I said before, I try and do that every day, is to write out three things that I did well. Because so often I think with confidence, we think that confidence comes externally. We think we'll be confident when we achieve this thing, when we hit this milestone, when someone, compliments us on our work. But real confidence is an inside job. It's something, and actually something. Certainly, some people seem to have like more innate confidence, but actually, confidence is something that's built. It's something that you can cultivate and that you can practice and get stronger at, like a muscle. Creativity is the same. People tell me all the time, oh, I'm not creative. And honestly, that it breaks my heart, because creativity is like our birthright. It's our life force. Like every child is born creative. Every person has creativity. But creativity similarly is a muscle. So it's a practice. The more you cultivate creativity, the more space you give creativity in your life, the more it's present for you, the more you feel you can trust it. And then authenticity, I believe, is also connected, because you need confidence and you need creativity to be authentic to yourself. You need to, like, so many people aren't authentic to themselves because they're mired in fear of what other people will think if they, act goofy, or if they share their idea. And so, yeah, we have to cultivate that practice of, I think the practice of confidence allows us to share ideas. The practice of cultivating creativity helps us to connect to our true authentic selves. And so, like, yeah, that combination is like really amazing. I hadn't thought about that before. Thank you for making me draw that circle with all three of those things.
How do you think can we really be more true to ourselves and embrace our authentic selves and not care so much?
As humans, we care so much about belonging, and that's, innate. So it's natural for us to think about how we fit and what other people think. And so I would say first, not to fight that, to say like, that's my brain working to keep me safe, and um, I can acknowledge that while also not putting all of the power into what other people think, and like allowing myself to ask myself, what do I think? What do I want? I think the first and most important piece of authenticity is self-awareness and self-connection, and making that space to talk to yourself. And when I say talk to yourself, I just mean check in with yourself. Notice, like, what do I love doing? Like, what did I love doing as a kid that I don't do anymore because I'm worried about what other people are going to think? What lights me up? When do I feel most alive? Asking yourself those kinds of questions, um, I think helps us to connect to our own self-awareness, and to realize, because I think so often we don't even realize like the things that we're stopping ourselves from doing because of those fears, until we ask ourselves the question. So yeah, I would say for authenticity, the first thing is getting curious with yourself, having those conversations with yourself, and finding out like what is your heart desire that what do you desire that you're denying yourself because you're afraid of what other people think? And then how could you maybe test being more in alignment with yourself in small ways so you can build a feeling of safety? Like if you feel afraid to dance because you've always been worried about what other people think, like maybe, yeah, like getting up on a stage and dancing is not your best first step, but like, could you cultivate a practice of dancing in your house so you can just like enjoy it? And because I think the more we give ourselves the permission to do the things that feel alive in us, the more we get addicted to that feeling in a healthy way. Like the more we realize like, oh wow, when I do that, I feel really good. I feel really alive and I want to feel that way more. And so like then we can start to take those bigger actions towards authenticity. But the tough thing about authenticity too is that not everyone will respond positively to you being your authentic self, because often that brings up, for other people, when they're not living authentically, other people's authenticity feels like a threat, or it feels like a reminder of what they're not living and what they're missing. And that's not about us. We have to remember that people's reactions to us is so rarely actually about us. So, my hope for people is that they start to focus more on how they feel and the people who they inspire through their authenticity than the people who, um, you know, lash out because your authenticity brings out a grief in them that they aren't living authentically.
What has actually helped you maybe to discover your authentic self a bit better? Because I'm asking this because sometimes I think it's almost a bit hidden in us, in a sense that we sometimes struggle to know like what really makes us authentic, like what is maybe something that we have taken from someone because we thought it's cool, but it's not really what we value, and what our authentic self is actually then really like.
I mean, I would say I'm, constantly on a mission to be living like more authentically and more, also be more present in my body. But the things that have really helped me are a practice of self-compassion, checking, checking in with myself and reflecting on how, things that go well and things that don't go well, and times when I think I'm being authentic to myself and times that I'm not. And, like trying to not judge that, be like, what, why is that? For me, I find that I'm inauthentic to myself often when I'm trying to people please, and I kind of like know where that comes from, and it's something that I'm working on, but I don't always, I'm not always 100% authentic, and that's okay. But yeah, I would say the things that have helped me are connecting back to child Piera and teenage Piera, developing this practice of checking in with myself, self-compassion, journaling, reflecting, and then also honoring like things that I want to do, like what sounds fun to me, just sort of like giving myself the space and permission to play and to explore things that I'm interested in, and to enjoy those and like build on them. I don't know. I feel like that also, like I've lived in New York for 20 years, and every year that I live in New York, I become like more of like a weird New Yorker. Like now I don't care. Now I don't care. I walk down the street like with my daughter, like singing songs, and like we have a speaker on our bike and we just play music, and I just like I don't know. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's just getting older. I feel like not about everything, but about like expressing myself and being like joyful and jubilant in public. I feel like I give myself like more and more and more permission to do that, because I'm just like, also when you see people in New York that are singing or wearing like bright wild colors or dancing in the street, it's just like it's kind of a joyful thing for everyone, like even if you're like, haha, that person is living their best life, like it's still like a fun moment for everyone, so I kind of just like, who cares?
Yeah, I feel like also, I mean, we all like, I mean, at least in most cases, right? We get to choose and we get to make those decisions where we wanna live. So that could also always be something nice, for young people just to expand. And I think it just adds so much, like living somewhere else.
But yeah, I mean, also, I think that's so much too of like being authentic is finding your people, the people that do inspire you with their authenticity, that feel like values aligned to how you want to live, who support you in your, who like high five you when you step out of your comfort zone and do something, versus like, giving you side eye and like judging you. Um, and I think that's a hard thing. Yeah, like to find and have the courage also to kind of move on from people that don't give you the space to truly be yourself or don't support you in being truly yourself. And again, I don't think that has to do with you. I think that always has to do with them.
For the end, because otherwise we're going to talk a lot more.
Forever, ever.
Exactly. I'm going to read you some quickfire questions and you give me your first thought as an answer, okay? Ready?
Okay. Okay.
Perfect. What was your craziest pinch me moment so far?
Craziest pinch me moment was, I have two. One was when we did 29 rooms for the first time, which was this 29 room warehouse art installation created with 29 different artists, visionaries, and brands. And it was just like this feat. Like we didn't know if we could do it. There was so much, everyone was doubting if we were going to be able to pull this thing off. And like the day that like we opened was just such a pinch me moment, like that we came together as a team and we like pulled off this wild feat. My other pinch me moment was that my face was on a billboard in Times Square. I was part of this like Olay Fearless campaign with all of these really incredible women, and yeah, just getting off the subway in Times Square and seeing my big old face was like teenage Piera, teenage Piera, 9-year-old Piera, like they all were like, oh wow. Yeah, like jaw on the sidewalk of New York City.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Congrats to that. Wow, that's so nice.
Thank you.
What's your by far most treasured play activity?
Dancing. Dancing is by far my most treasured play activity. And a very silly way that I like to dance is by picking one body part and seeing if I can dance a whole song just doing moves with like led by that one body part. And I think it's just like such a fun way to be like, instead of thinking about like, how do I look and is this a cool move, and just being more like, how many things can my elbow do? Aren't our bodies amazing and wild?
I love that. I've never thought of that ever before. I'm gonna try this one.
Try it. I mean, you're gonna feel very silly, but just like try and enjoy the silliness of
Yeah.
it. It's kind of like very like I feel like it's something you would tell a child to do that they'd get really into, but that like as adults we would never usually
Probably,
do.
yeah. Super nice. Um, what's something you would have wished to know earlier in life?
I wish I had developed a self-compassion practice way earlier in my life. I wish I had known that self-compassion makes you stronger, more secure, and more accountable. Um, because I think it would have really transformed a lot of things in my life to give myself more kindness.
And lastly, what's next for you on your like goal or wish list to do?
Well, my goals so far, I haven't spent a ton of time on 2023 visioning, though I will. But my main two things right now, my first goal is to play bigger. So I started a new business called Wild Things World this past year, and my whole mission is to help adults to play more and explore their creativity. So this next year, yeah, I'm focused on playing bigger. So just being more courageous with how I put this out in the world and the impact that I have. And then the second goal that I have is to um, be more embodied, like spend more time connected to my body, my physical self, which is like, I find the more that I do that, the more in alignment I feel, the more authentic I feel, and the more creative I feel. Like creativity is so much more physical than we realize. So yeah, I will be dancing, running, stretching, checking in with my physical self more in 2023.
Super important. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we're already at the end. Piera, I enjoyed our conversation super much, and I absolutely valued your truthfulness, your transparency, and I feel like you brought a lot of value and adding that creative spirit to the listeners, to the viewers, and trying some things out maybe to get a better creative feeling maybe also back to their life. So thank you so much for being on here.
I hope it helped. Yeah, it was really fun talking to you. Vielen Dank für alles.
Perfect. Then thank you.
Tschüss.